Her parents sold her for being disabled, but the mountain man saw a goddess in a wheelchair. Hello, my dear friend. Before we ride into this story together, I want you to settle back for a moment and picture a small western town in the 1880s. Dust in the street, a church steeple that leans a little to one side, and a house on the edge of town where a young woman sits at a window and watches other people walk past on their own 2 feet. Her name was Miriam Cole, and by the time she was 24, the world had already decided what she was worth. She had not always used a wheelchair. When she was 12, a fever ran through the valley and took a handful of children with it. Miriam survived, but the fever burned through her spine and left her legs quiet and heavy. From the waist up, she was strong and steady. From the waist down, there was nothing but a dull ache and a silence she could not talk her way out of. A traveling carpenter had built her a chair with wooden wheels and iron rims. She learned to push herself across floorboards with arms that grew hard and capable, while the rest of the town shook their heads and whispered the word cripple under their breath. In the beginning, her parents told themselves it was only for a season. Her mother prayed over her at night, asking the Lord to wake those legs. Her father carried her out to the porch to see the sunrise and said they would walk together again. Years passed. The crops failed twice. Her brothers left for work on the railroad. The house grew quieter. The prayers turned thin and bitter. Her father's back bent under debt he could not pay, and her mother's mouth set in a hard line that rarely softened. By the time Miriam reached 24, the talk in that little house had changed. She heard it through the thin walls and under the rattle of pots. If she could walk, she would be wed and gone by now, her mother said one night. Instead, she sits there like a stone. 24 years of feeding and tending, and what do we have to show for it? Her father answered in a voice worn down by worry. We cannot carry her forever, he said. The bank is at our door. The store will not let us run another tab. A son would bring in wages. A healthy daughter might bring in a bride price. But Miriam, he did not finish. He did not need to. Miriam sat in the next room with her sewing in her lap and felt each word like a small nail being driven into a board. That summer, a widower from the hills started coming down to town more often. He was not the mountain man this story belongs to, just a sharp-faced rancher with thin lips and a heavy purse. His name was Harlan Pike. He needed help to keep his house and his younger children, and did not care much what shape that help came in, so long as it was cheap. People like the Coles heard about men like Harlan the way folk hear about storms, in low, worried voices, with one eye on the sky. One hot afternoon, he sat at their kitchen table with his hat on the bench beside him, and his boots planted firm on their worn rug. Miriam listened from the doorway as her mother poured coffee and her father laid out his troubles. They did not say he was there to bargain over a daughter, but the truth lay thick in the air. She is strong in the hands and shoulders, her mother said. Keeps a neat house, good with mending. She cannot walk, but she can roll. You would not find a more grateful wife, Mr. Pike. The word wife landed like a stone in Miriam's chest. No one had asked if she wanted that word spoken over her. No one had asked if she wanted any man at all. Harlan tapped one finger on the table. A woman who cannot stand will not run off, he said. She will have to be content with what she is given. I can afford to take in one such as her, if the price is right. Price. There it was. Not dowry, not blessing. Price. Miriam turned her chair away from the doorway then and stared at her own hands. They were square and capable, a little rough from work. She had fed this family, sewed their shirts, held their fevered heads. Now those same hands and the body they were attached to were being weighed like a mule that limped. By the time the sun slid low, they had an agreement. Harlan would clear some of her father's debt at the store and bring a small purse of coins besides. In return, Miriam would be brought to his ranch before the first snow and married under a quiet sky, far from the church that used to sing for her. That night, her mother brushed her hair in slow strokes. "This is for your own good," she said. "You will not starve. You will not be left alone when we are gone. A man is better than no one." Miriam looked at her reflection in the dark window. She saw a woman with calm gray eyes, hair like heavy wheat, and a body that ended in a wooden chair. Somewhere under all that, she felt a steady ember of anger and something that might still be hope. What none of them knew that evening, not her mother, not her father, not Harlan with his thin mouth and his counting fingers, was that the man who would come down out of the high country to collect this so-called burden was not Harlan Pike at all. He would be a mountain man with shoulders like a barn door and hands used to lifting more than his own share of the world. And the first time he looked at Miriam in that chair, he would not see a thing to pity or to purchase. He would see a woman the mountains might have shaped themselves, a goddess on wheels in a land that had only ever expected her to crawl. The weeks between that kitchen bargain and the first snow felt like watching someone else's life move toward a cliff. Miriam sewed the hem of a new plain dress because her mother said a wife should not arrive looking like a charity case. She mended her father's cuffs and packed away her few small treasures in a shawl, a ribbon from childhood. A book of hymns, too, worn for church. No one said the word sold, but it hung in the air each time her father counted the coins Harlan had already pressed into his hand. Outside, the town of Willow Bend went on the way small western towns do. Wagons rattled over the ruts. Men argued about cattle prices. Women hurried between store and well. From her window, Miriam watched boots and skirts pass and imagined what it would feel like to roll out into that street and keep going until the world ran out. Then she would glance down at her quiet legs and at the wooden wheels at her hips and remind herself the world did not lay itself open like that for women in chairs. The day Harlan was meant to come dawned cold and bright. Frost silvered the pump handle. The cottonwoods at the edge of town had dropped most of their leaves. Her mother fussed with her hair until it lay smooth over her shoulders, then tied it back with the ribbon Miriam had hoped to keep. Her father hovered by the door, scriptural words drying on his tongue because there was no verse for this kind of trade. "When you get there, you mind your tongue," her mother said. "Be grateful. A man who takes you on is doing you a kindness." Miriam almost asked if anyone had ever thought to tell the man that she might be doing him one too. The words rose and then slid back down, heavy as stones in her chest. They heard the wagon before they saw it, iron rims on frozen ground. Her father straightened his jacket. Her mother smoothed her apron. Miriam set her hands on the rims of her wheels and told her lungs to keep a steady rhythm. The wagon that pulled into their yard was not the one she had expected. It was an old freight wagon, big and scarred, with a canvas roll tied in the back and a neat stack of supplies wedged against the boards. The team was a pair of big grays with winter hair standing up along their necks. On the seat sat a man she had never seen before. He climbed down and for a moment seemed to bring half the sky with him. He was tall in a way that made door frames nervous, shoulders so broad they filled the space between wagon and house when he stepped forward. His shirt strained a little across a chest built by real work, not by showing off. His hair was sun-bleached at the tips and tied back, his jaw dark with beard. Under the brim of his hat, his eyes were clear and steady, the color of mountain water before the thaw. His hands were large and nicked with old scars, the kind of hands that had lifted logs and hauled rope, and maybe once or twice held something gentle and breakable, and been surprised at how it felt. Miriam's father frowned. "Mr. Pike," he said, "I was expecting you yourself." "Harlan is laid up with a bad back," the stranger answered. His voice was deep, but not harsh. "I am Elias Turner, neighbor up near the timber line. He hired my team for the haul, said there was a wife to be brought up and a chair to load." Wife. Chair. There it was, laid out like tools on a bench. Her mother stepped in quickly, eager to smooth over any gap. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Turner," she said. "She is ready. We have her things packed." Elias's gaze moved past them to where Miriam waited in the shadow of the doorway. For a heartbeat, she felt naked under that look, not because it was cruel, but because it was so direct. He took in the chair, the still legs covered by a neat skirt, the hands resting on the wooden rims, the straight way she held her back. His face did not change. There was no flinch, no flicker of pity, no quick little twist of the mouth that said, "What a shame." If anything, his eyes softened just a shade at the sight of her arms, muscled from years of pushing herself through a world not built for her. "So," he said quietly, almost to himself, "you are the one they say cannot stand." It should have stung. Instead, something in the way he said it made it sound less like a judgment and more like a fact the mountains might notice. Miriam met his gaze, and for the first time that day, lifted her chin. "My legs do not work," she said. "The rest of me does." The corner of his mouth tilted, a small flash of respect. "Seems plain," he said. "We will load your trunk first. Then we will see about making a place for that chair where it rides easy." Her father shifted, uneasy with talk that treated her as someone whose comfort mattered. "Just get her there, Mr. Turner," he muttered. "Mr. Pike will see to the rest." Elias looked at him, then at Miriam again. If he heard the dismissal in that tone, he did not answer it with words. He answered by stepping back, giving her room to roll forward on her own, instead of grabbing the handles and shoving her like a crate. The simple act felt so foreign, it made her throat tight. As he lifted her small trunk as if it weighed nothing and settled it into the wagon, Miriam watched the way his muscles moved under his shirt. This was a man who was used to carrying what other people could not. The thought came and went like a breath, but it stayed warm in some corner of her mind. When he came back for her, he did not reach for the chair first. He stood beside her and held out his hand. "Ready?" he asked. No one had ever asked that before. They had pushed, dragged, decided. They had not asked. "As I will ever be," she said. Her fingers slid into his palm. The grip that closed around them was steady and sure, and in that moment, between porch and wagon, between the life she was leaving and the life that waited up there among the high pines, Miriam felt the first faint crack appear in the story her parents had written for her. The wagon rolled out of Willow Bend with a slow creak, the kind that comes from old wood and miles already traveled. Miriam sat with her back against the seat rail, her chair wedged and tied in the bed behind her trunk. Elias had taken his time with that, bracing the wheels so they would not jar her more than the road itself. Her parents stood on the hard, packed yard and watched the team pull away. Her mother lifted a hand at the last moment as if to wave, then let it fall. Her father turned back toward the house before the wagon had cleared the first bend. No one ran after her. No one called her name. The town slid past in a parade of small, familiar things. The store with its sign faded by sun, the blacksmith shop with smoke curling from the chimney, the church where she had once sat in the front pew and sung hymns with both legs tucked neatly under her. She saw faces at windows, a child on a step, a woman hanging laundry. Some nodded, some pretended not to see. As they passed the livery, she caught sight of Harlan Pike himself leaning in the shade, a hand pressed to his lower back, his expression pinched and sour. He did not step forward. He did not lift a hand in greeting or farewell. He only watched the wagon that carried the woman he had bought with his money and decided was not worth the trouble of claiming in person. It struck Miriam then with an almost physical clarity. To her parents, she had been a debt to be settled. To Harlan, she was a line in a ledger. To both, she was something to be moved, not someone whose life might have its own shape. Elias flicked the reins, and the grays leaned into the traces. The town fell behind like a story that had been told too often and worn thin. For a long while, they rode in silence. The road curved along a shallow creek, then turned toward the foothills. The air grew cleaner, as if somebody had opened a window in the sky. Sagebrush gave way to clusters of pine. Miriam watched the landscape change and felt a tightness ease in her chest with every mile that put space between her and the small mines of Willow Bend. At last, Elias spoke, eyes still on the team. "How long you been in that chair?" he asked. "Since I was 12, she said. "Fever came through, took some, left me this." She touched her lap lightly. "Doctor said the fire in my back was done," she added. "Said my legs would likely never answer again. Town took that to mean the rest of me might as well sit quiet too." He grunted softly, not in doubt but in understanding. "I saw a man lose both hands in a logging run once," he said. "Boss tossed him out like a busted tool. That same man learned to carve with his feet. Made better work than most men do with 10 fingers. Folks who live off other people's backs like to decide what is useful and what is not. Land does not care. It only asks, can you learn your way around it?" Miriam let the words settle. No one in Willow Bend had ever talked about her body that way. They had whispered around her, called her poor thing or burden when they thought she was not listening. They had not said useful, and certainly not capable. The road narrowed as they climbed. Rocks poked up through the earth. The wagon jolted more, and she pressed one hand to the rail to brace herself. At a rough stretch, Elias slowed the team and glanced her way. "You tell me if it gets to be too much," he said. "We can stop and let the worst of the shaking settle." "I have ridden out worse roads," she said. "You should see the ruts in my parents' hallway." It was a small joke, but it slipped out with a surprising lightness. For a heartbeat, she wondered if she had overstepped. Then Elias gave a short laugh, warm and quick, and some tight knot inside her loosened. Near midday, they reached a shallow crossing where spring floods had chewed away part of the bank. The creek itself was low now, only a bright ribbon over stones, but the drop on one side of the ford was sharp. Elias drew the team to a halt and studied the ground ahead. "Wagon will make it," he said, "but I do not like you bouncing through that in the bed like a sack of grain." He climbed down and came around to the side. "If you trust me a spell," he said, "I will carry you over, then come back for the chair. Safer than dragging you and Iron both at once." The idea of leaving the chair, even for a moment, made her throat close. It had been her legs for 12 years. Still, the thought of being flung sideways if a wheel dropped wrong was worse. She took a steady breath. "All right," she said, "but do not let go till we are on solid ground again." "Fair trade," he answered. He scooped her up with no more strain than lifting a child, though she was no small woman. His arms were solid around her back, and under her knees, his chest broad and warm. For a heartbeat, she stiffened, not from fear of falling, but from the strange shock of being held without apology or comment. No one had carried her like that since she was a girl, and even then it had been done with sighs and talk of burden. Elias stepped down the far side of the ditch with careful balance, boots finding sure places on the rocks, and set her gently on a flat patch of ground beyond the roughest drop. "You wait here," he said. "I will bring the rest." He went back for the wagon and the chair, moving with the easy strength of a man used to hauling more than his own weight. Miriam sat on the cool earth and watched him work. In that moment, with the sky wide overhead and the creek chattering past, and this mountain man treating her as something to be guarded rather than traded, she began to feel a small quiet stirring in her chest, something that looked very much like the first green shoot after a long, hard winter. By late afternoon, the land had changed its face again. The air grew thinner and sharper. The pines stood taller and closer together, their trunks dark against patches of late snow that still clung in the shadows. Miriam could feel every stone in the road through the boards at her back, yet she also felt a strange, widening space inside her as the town dropped farther away with each turn of the wheel. Elias drove with an easy patience, hands light on the reins, shoulders loose in a way that told her he knew this country well. When they stopped to let the horses drink at a narrow stream, he checked the ropes around her chair again, testing for slack, adjusting one knot so the frame would not rub. It was a small thing, but no one had ever worried about whether her chair was comfortable before. They had worried only about where to park it out of the way. Toward evening, a different kind of fence line appeared, rough posts listing under their own age, wire sagging between them. Beyond it lay Harlan Pike's spread, if a tired patch of ground and a leaning house could be called that. A scatter of cattle dotted the field, ribs showing under dull hides. The house itself sat hunched on a low rise, its porch boards warped, its windows cloudy with dirt and neglect. It did not look like a haven for anyone, much less a woman who had been promised a new life there. Two thin children watched from the porch steps as the wagon pulled in, a boy and a girl with the same pinched look around the eyes. Their clothes were clean but worn, patched at elbows and knees. The girl's gaze lit with curiosity when she saw Miriam's chair. The boy's eyes slid toward the barn with a quick, anxious flick, as if measuring how far he would have to run if someone started shouting. Harlan came out wiping his hands on a rag that had once been white. Up close, he looked smaller than he had from the shade of the livery, the kind of man who had grown mean to make up for what he lacked in height and heart. His back might be bad, as he had claimed, but his gaze was sharp and restless, always moving, counting, judging. "So," he said, looking first at the horses, then at the wagon bed. "You brought the goods." The word goods slid over Miriam's skin like cold grease. Elias climbed down without answering and began to undo the lashes on her chair. "She has a name," Elias said after a beat. "Miriam Cole." Harlan snorted, as if that were an unnecessary detail. "She will have my name soon enough," he said. "What matters is whether she can keep up some portion of work for the food she eats. Her father talked a lot about her hands. We will see if his tongue is worth the money I paid." His gaze fell on Miriam then, and for the first time since they left town, she felt that old familiar sting, the one that came when people looked at the chair and stopped there. His eyes did not soften or search her face. They weighed and dismissed in one sweep. "Smaller than I expected," he muttered. chair is bigger than the woman. Humph. Well, we make do. Miriam's fingers tightened on the wooden rims. The children on the step watched every word. The little girl's cheeks flushed hot, as if embarrassed on Miriam's behalf. The boy simply looked tired, like someone who had seen enough of Harlan Pike's bargains to know how they ended. Elias lifted the chair down with the same care he had used at her parents' house, setting it square on the packed earth before turning to her. "Ready to shift?" he asked quietly. It was the second time that day he had offered that small respect. Miriam moved her hands, swung herself forward with practiced strength, and settled into the chair while he steadied it with one hand. When she looked up, their eyes met for a moment. There was something there she could not yet name, only feel, like the first warm wind before spring. Harlan cleared his throat, impatient. "You have your coin," Elias said, straightening. "You have the woman her parents promised. That ends my part." Harlan's mouth twisted. "Her father said nothing about a special rig," he said, jerking his chin at the chair. "I did not bargain for extra trouble. The coins I advanced were fair for a sound girl, not one who has to be rolled from room to room." He spoke as if Miriam were not 6 feet away, listening to every word. "That chair is how she works," Elias said, voice still even. "You take it away, you might as well cut off your own legs and try to plow with your hands." For a heartbeat, anger flared in Harlan's eyes. Then he let out a short laugh with no joy in it. "You mountain men," he said. "Always talking like the hills put poetry in your teeth. She is what she is. I will get what use I can until she breaks or I do. Then the Lord will sort out the rest." He turned toward the porch and shouted for someone to fix a room. The boy flinched. The girl shrank back. Miriam watched that, and something inside her went very still. This was the life her parents had traded her into. A roof bought with borrowed coins, and whatever strength she had left squeezed out in chores and child-minding until there was nothing more to give. Behind her, she felt Elias draw a slow breath, the kind a man takes when he is weighing 2 very different trails. The sun was dropping behind the ridge, painting the sky in streaks of gold and rose. It slanted across the yard and caught her hair, turning the loose strands into a soft halo around her face. She sat there in that worn chair, straight-backed, hands steady, eyes clear despite everything. Against the shabby house and the sour little man who claimed to own her future, she looked almost unreal, like some figure carved out of light and stubbornness. Elias's hand tightened on the side of the wagon. In that moment, with the sun giving her a crown and the wheels of her chair making a circle at her feet, the thought came to him clean and sure. Whatever this woman had been called in town, whatever price had been scratched beside her name in some man's ledger, the mountains had sent him to deliver something else entirely. Not a burden, not a debt. A goddess on wheels in a place that did not know how to see her yet. Harlan barked at the children, then stomped off toward the barn, leaving Miriam in the yard like freight dropped at the wrong door. Evening cooled the dust. Elias stood by the wagon and felt something in him settle hard. He had seen men treat worn harness with more care than this. He walked back to her chair. "Is this where you want to be?" he asked, voice low. Miriam's smile was small and tired. "What I want has never counted for much," she said. "They point, I roll. No self-pity, just worn, steady courage." Elias looked at the sagging porch, the thin children on the steps, the house that felt built out of hunger and bad temper more than boards. "Some trades are bad from the start," he said. "They need breaking." Harlan came back, rag in hand. "Room's ready," he said. "Leave her by the steps. The boy can drag that chair in." Elias did not move. You paid her father for a wife, he said. Not for something to grind down because your back is weak. If what you wanted was the debt cleared, I can do that. The deal is done, Harlan snapped. She's mine. You've had your pay. Get on your way. Mine. Get on. Words Miriam had heard in too many tones. Elias stepped closer. I will put every dollar back in your hand, he said. You sign away whatever claim you think you hold and you stay clear of her. Harlan gave a sharp, ugly laugh. You going to haul a cripple into those rocks and call it a blessing, he said. You always this soft in the head, Turner. The girl on the steps flinched at the word. Anger flared in Miriam, clean and hot for that child and for herself. I see a woman who crossed country in that chair, Elias said. More spine than most men I have worked beside. Last offer. Take the money and walk away. Harlan's fingers dropped toward the pistol at his belt. They were slow, but full of spite. Before steel showed, Elias caught his wrist and turned it down until the gun fell in the dust. No blood, just choice. You are outmatched, he said quietly. By my hands and by your own fear. Take the coin. Let her go, where she is wanted. Harlan's shoulders sagged. Double what I paid, he muttered. Done, Elias said. A few coins changed hands. Harlan slunk back toward the porch, smaller than before, leaving the woman he had traded twice standing free in her chair. Elias turned to Miriam. If you come with me, he said, it will not be as freight. It will be because I choose you and you choose me. You can say no. I will still see you safe somewhere that is not here. Miriam looked at the children, at the gray yard, at the house that would always see her as a cost. Then she looked up at the dark line of mountains and at the way Elias waited, steady as stone. My parents sold me, she said softly. This time I spend myself where I wish. Take me where a chair can sit in the middle of the room, not hidden in a corner. His smile was slow and bright. Then we go home, he said. Years later, a peddler would tell her parents of a big man with mountain shoulders and a woman in a strong wheeled chair who ran a cabin like a small kingdom above the timberline. Miriam Cole Turner, happy and well. Her father turned his face away. Her mother wept where no one could see. Up on the ridge, Miriam sat by her window with the sun in the spokes of her chair and watched Elias split wood. To him, she was never a burden or a bargain. She was the strong heart of that basin, a goddess in a wheelchair, in a world that had finally made room for the way she moved. My dear friend, if this story kept you company today, I would be grateful if you tapped like and hit subscribe so we can ride the next trail together.